Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter of King Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville, was born in 1466 into a nation torn by civil war. As a member of the House of York, she symbolized hope for a peaceful future after years of bloody conflict during the Wars of the Roses. Her birth, celebrated with immense pomp, marked the first time in over a century that a princess was born to a reigning English monarch. Growing up in royal palaces and later a separate nursery household, Elizabeth was well educated for a noblewoman of her time. She was taught reading, writing, languages, music, and moral values, and was known for her grace and intelligence. But her childhood was marked by tragedy and political instability. After her father's sudden death in 1483, her brothers, the young Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, were declared illegitimate and vanished under suspicious circumstances. Their uncle, Richard III, seized the throne. In the aftermath, Elizabeth's fate became entwined with that of Henry Tudor, a distant Lancastrian claimant. Their proposed marriage, arranged through the efforts of both Elizabeth Woodville and Margaret Beaufort, would become the cornerstone of national unity. After Henry's victory at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, he married Elizabeth in January 1486, uniting the warring houses of York and Lancaster. Their union symbolized peace and legitimacy. Elizabeth, now Queen Consort, gave birth to future King Henry VIII and 6 other children, although several died young. Her gentle nature and regal presence brought stability to Henry VII's reign. Though she died young in 1503, her role was pivotal. Through marriage, motherhood, and quiet influence, she helped heal a fractured kingdom and establish the powerful Tudor dynasty that would rule England for over a century. Elizabeth of York was born into a world of opulence, ceremony, and courtly privilege. As the eldest child of King Edward IV and Queen Elizabeth Woodville, she enjoyed the splendor and security of royal life from birth. Raised in lavish palaces, dressed in fine fabrics, and surrounded by servants and tutors, Elizabeth's early years were filled with the elegance expected of a royal princess. Yet beneath the glittering surface of court life, her childhood was deeply shaped by the turbulent politics of the time. Her mother's family, the Woodvilles, had risen quickly through the ranks of nobility due to Queen Elizabeth's marriage to Edward IV, an alliance that many powerful nobles resented. Chief among their opponents was Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker, who had once been instrumental in placing Edward IV on the throne. Warwick and others viewed the Woodvilles as ambitious upstarts, and their sudden influence at court created deep divisions within the ruling elite. As a result, Elizabeth grew up amidst constant undercurrents of rivalry, distrust, and shifting alliances. The royal household, though outwardly glamorous, was often tense with political maneuvering. These dynamics would only intensify after her father's death in 1483. Elizabeth was just 17 when her world was turned upside down. Her younger brothers disappeared in the Tower of London, and her uncle Richard III usurped the crown. These experiences, though tragic, would shape Elizabeth into a figure of quiet strength and resilience. While she was shielded from public life as a child, the political instability surrounding her family forced her to mature quickly. The tensions between her mother's relatives and the old nobility not only defined the atmosphere of her youth, but also laid the groundwork for her eventual role as a unifying figure in English history, one who would help bridge dynastic divides through her marriage to Henry VII. Elizabeth of York was fortunate to receive an exceptional education for a young woman of the 15th century, one that reflected not only her royal status, but also her father's progressive views on the value of learning. King Edward IV believed in the intellectual development of his children, including his daughters, and ensured they were given the kind of education that would prepare them for roles of influence, diplomacy, and leadership. From an early age, Elizabeth was taught to read and write, skills not universally emphasized for women at the time. She became fluent in English and was educated in French, the language of diplomacy and European courts, which would prove useful in royal correspondence and negotiations. Her education also included elements of classical learning, with exposure to religious texts and moral philosophy, which helped shape her sense of duty, piety, and decorum, traits highly valued in a queen. Beyond academics, Elizabeth was also trained in the traditional courtly arts expected of noble women. She developed skills in music, playing instruments and possibly singing, and was instructed in court dances, which were essential for ceremonial occasions and social life. Needlework and embroidery were also key aspects of her upbringing, not only as practical skills, but as symbols of refinement and feminine virtue. This well-rounded education did more than polish her courtly manners. It gave Elizabeth the tools to navigate the complex world of dynastic politics. Her ability to converse with diplomats, read letters and documents, and maintain a graceful public image helped solidify her role as a respected queen consort in later years. While her brothers were prepared for kingship, Elizabeth was being quietly groomed to serve as the heart of a royal household, cultured, composed, and capable of uniting rival factions with diplomacy and grace. Her education laid the foundation for the pivotal role she would one day play in England's royal history. In her youth, Elizabeth of York's romantic prospects were shaped less by affection and more by the ever-shifting landscape of political alliances. As the daughter of King Edward IV, her hand in marriage was a valuable diplomatic tool, and her early betrothals were orchestrated with the strategic interests of the English crown in mind. Her first proposed match was to George Neville, nephew of the powerful Earl of Warwick. This alliance was designed to strengthen ties between the royal family and one of England's most influential noble houses. However, the engagement was eventually dissolved as the relationship between Edward IV and the Neville soured, particularly after Warwick turned against the king and aligned with the Lancastrians during the Wars of the Roses. Later, a more prestigious match was arranged between Elizabeth and Charles, the Dauphin of France, the heir to the French throne. This potential union aimed to secure peace and a lasting alliance between England and France. For a time, it held the promise of elevating Elizabeth to the position of future Queen of France. But like many political maneuvers of the era, the engagement was short-lived. The marriage negotiations collapsed as diplomatic priorities shifted and France sought alliances elsewhere, leaving Elizabeth once again unbetrothed. These broken engagements highlight the volatile nature of European politics during the 15th century, where royal children were often used as pawns in larger power struggles. For Elizabeth, these experiences underscored the instability of her times and the limited control she had over her own future. Yet they also positioned her for a more critical role to come, one that would eventually help unite two warring houses and bring a measure of peace to a fractured England. The death of King Edward IV in 1483 marked a turning point in Elizabeth of York's life, thrusting her into a period of profound personal and political upheaval. At just 17 years old, she witnessed her family's fortunes collapse almost overnight. Her younger brothers, Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, were the rightful heirs to the throne. However, their path to succession was swiftly obstructed by their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Claiming illegitimacy on the part of Elizabeth's parents' marriage, Richard declared that Edward IV's children had no legal right to the crown. With this declaration, Elizabeth's brothers were placed in the Tower of London, initially under the guise of preparation for Edward VI's coronation. But the coronation never happened. Instead, Richard took the throne for himself, becoming King Richard III. What followed was a mysterious and chilling episode that haunted England for generations. Elizabeth's two brothers vanished from the tower and were never seen again. Though their exact fate remains one of history's enduring mysteries, it is widely believed they were murdered, likely to secure Richard's hold on power. For Elizabeth, this was not only a political crisis, but a deeply personal tragedy. She lost her father, her royal status, and most likely her beloved younger brothers in the span of just months. This turbulent period reshaped Elizabeth's role in English politics. Once a princess with a secure future, she was now a symbol of the disinherited Yorkist cause and a potential threat to Richard III's rule. At the same time, her presence became vital to those who sought to challenge Richard's authority, setting the stage for her eventual union with Henry Tudor and the birth of the Tudor dynasty. In the wake of the political chaos following King Edward IV's death and the rise of Richard III, Elizabeth of York's future seemed uncertain. Her mother, Elizabeth Woodville, found herself stripped of power and influence, her sons missing, presumed dead, and her daughters vulnerable. Realizing that survival required strategy, Elizabeth Woodville turned to an unlikely ally. Margaret Beaufort, the formidable and politically astute mother of Henry Tudor, a distant Lancastrian claimant to the English throne. Though they came from rival houses, York and Lancaster, both women recognized the mutual benefit of uniting their causes. Margaret sought to position her son as a viable alternative to Richard III, while Elizabeth Woodville wanted to restore her daughter's status and honor. Together, they devised a bold and ambitious plan. If Henry Tudor succeeded in claiming the English crown, he would marry Elizabeth of York, thus uniting the two warring houses and bringing a symbolic end to the Wars of the Roses. This proposed marriage was more than a personal union, it was a political masterstroke. It promised stability to a nation exhausted by decades of civil war, and it gave Henry's claim to the throne additional legitimacy through Elizabeth's Yorkist lineage. For Elizabeth, this arrangement represented a path back to power and security, as well as the possibility of becoming queen. The agreement between the two matriarchs was formalized before Henry even set foot in England. When he eventually defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, the long-anticipated union became a reality. Elizabeth married Henry in January 1486, and their marriage not only solidified the Tudor claim, but also marked the dawn of a new dynasty, one built upon both Yorkist and Lancastrian blood. Through this pivotal alliance, Elizabeth became a cornerstone in the effort to heal a fractured realm. After Henry Tudor's decisive victory over Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in August 1485, he fulfilled a long-standing promise that would change the course of English history. True to the agreement made between his mother, Margaret Beaufort, and Elizabeth Woodville, Henry VII married Elizabeth of York in January 1486. This union was far more than a marriage between two individuals. It was a symbolic and strategic alliance that brought an end to the decades-long conflict between the rival houses of York and Lancaster. By marrying Elizabeth, Henry sought to legitimize his claim to the throne, which, by bloodline alone, was relatively weak. Elizabeth, as the eldest daughter of King Edward IV and a representative of the Yorkist line, provided the political and dynastic strength needed to unite a divided realm. Their marriage effectively merged the two feuding factions, giving rise to the iconic Tudor Rose, a fusion of the Red Rose of Lancaster and the White Rose of York. The wedding was met with public approval, as many in England hoped that this new royal alliance would bring lasting peace after years of civil unrest and dynastic struggle. Elizabeth was crowned queen in November 1487, reinforcing her status and affirming the legitimacy of the Tudor reign. The couple would go on to have several children, including Henry VIII, securing the dynasty's future. While the marriage was politically motivated, it eventually grew into a respectful and stable partnership. Elizabeth played her role with grace and dignity, providing her husband with both heirs and the public support of Yorkist sympathizers. Her quiet strength and noble lineage helped reinforce the image of a united monarchy. Through her marriage to Henry VII, Elizabeth of York became a key figure in shaping the future of England, bridging the past and paving the way for the powerful Tudor legacy that would follow. Soon after her marriage to Henry VII, Elizabeth of York became pregnant, stepping into her role as queen consort with grace and fulfilling one of her most important duties, securing the Tudor dynasty through heirs. In September 1486, she gave birth to their first child, Prince Arthur, who was celebrated as the hope of a new, unified England. His birth solidified the legitimacy of the Tudor reign and brought joy to a nation weary of conflict. Over the course of her marriage, Elizabeth bore 7 children, though only 4 survived infancy: Arthur, Margaret, Henry, and Mary. Each child played a vital role in the future of both the Tudor family and European politics. Arthur, the heir apparent, was expected to continue the new dynasty, while Margaret would later become Queen of Scotland, laying the foundation for the eventual union of the English and Scottish crowns. Their second son, Henry, would ultimately succeed his father as Henry VIII, one of England's most famous monarchs. Mary, the youngest surviving daughter, became Queen of France and later Duchess of Suffolk. Elizabeth was admired for her devotion to her children and her quiet, dignified presence at court. Though she largely avoided political intrigue, her influence was felt through the strength and unity she brought to the royal household. She balanced her roles as queen, wife, and mother with composure and warmth, endearing herself to both the court and the public. The losses of her children, especially Arthur in 1502, were deeply felt and took an emotional toll on her. Yet through joy and tragedy, Elizabeth remained a central pillar in the Tudor dynasty's foundation. Her ability to produce heirs and maintain stability at court helped legitimize Henry VII's reign and ensured the continuation of the Tudor legacy. As Queen of England, Elizabeth of York embraced her role with dignity and quiet influence. She became a respected patron of the arts, supporting music, literature, and religious institutions. Her court reflected her refined taste and appreciation for culture, serving as a space where elegance and learning were celebrated. Elizabeth herself was especially skilled in traditional feminine arts such as embroidery and needlework, and her creations were often admired for their beauty and intricacy. Her personal refinement and gentle demeanor set the tone for the Tudor court, balancing the political intensity of her husband's reign with grace and civility. Elizabeth also took her charitable duties seriously. She frequently gave alms to the poor, supported hospitals, and funded religious foundations, continuing the medieval tradition of queens as intercessors for the less fortunate. Her piety and generosity helped solidify her public image as a compassionate and noble figure, beloved by the common people. In addition to her ceremonial and charitable roles, Elizabeth was actively involved in the upbringing of her children. While she did not dominate court politics, she played a crucial role in shaping the early lives and values of the Tudor heirs. Her influence was particularly significant in instilling a sense of unity and royal duty in her children, who would go on to shape the course of European history. She maintained a close, affectionate relationship with them and helped supervise their early education, ensuring they were raised with the dignity and decorum expected of royalty. Her presence provided emotional stability within the royal household, and she was widely regarded as a unifying figure between the houses of York and Lancaster. Though often working behind the scenes, Elizabeth's impact on the early Tudor dynasty was both meaningful and enduring. Through her cultural patronage, charitable acts, and maternal guidance, she left a legacy of grace and strength that would echo throughout her children's reigns and beyond. The final years of Elizabeth of York's life were overshadowed by personal tragedy and national sorrow. In 1502, her eldest son and heir to the throne, Prince Arthur, died suddenly at the age of 15. His death sent shockwaves through the royal family and the nation, as he had represented the future stability of the newly established Tudor dynasty. Elizabeth, deeply grieved by the loss of her son, sought comfort in her family and her faith, trying to remain strong for her younger children and for the realm. In a bid to secure the Tudor succession, Elizabeth soon became pregnant again. The pregnancy brought hope to the royal household, but complications during childbirth in February 1503 led to her untimely death at just 37 years old. She died at the Tower of London, only days after giving birth to a daughter who did not survive long. Her death was a devastating blow not only to her husband, King Henry VII, but to the entire nation. Elizabeth had been a symbol of unity, grace, and quiet strength, a queen who had helped heal a divided kingdom. Henry VII was said to be heartbroken by her passing. Though often portrayed as emotionally reserved, he reportedly mourned deeply and never fully recovered from the loss of his beloved wife. He honored her memory with an elaborate funeral and commissioned a magnificent tomb in Westminster Abbey, where they would eventually lie side by side. Elizabeth's death marked the end of an era. Her gentle influence and stabilizing presence had helped shape the early years of the Tudor court. Even in her absence, her legacy endured through her surviving children, most notably Henry VIII, and through the lasting peace she had helped to secure for England.